Hi, my name's Ramona Mirage, and I have one question for you. How's your head? You may be asking yourself, why should I trust this man in a dress to give me advice about my life? Well, I am licensed in the states of Massachusetts and Illinois as a licensed clinical social worker, and as more private practice clinicians stop offering to take insurance, this is what the affordable option is going to look like. Today we're going to talk about the holidays. From seasonal depression to setting boundaries with that racist uncle to dealing with financial woes so you can make sure you have enough alcohol to get through it all. Seasonal depression is a thing. Depression affects many of us all year round, but for some, it only affects them during certain seasons, especially during the winter. The reason for this is that depression is caused by a reduction in serotonin and dopamine levels, which are the chemicals in our brain that make us feel happy. That's why we feel good during sex, when we eat our favorite foods, when we do activities we enjoy. And so during the winter, when we have less sunlight, that can affect our serotonin and dopamine levels, which then makes us more depressed. If you're anything like me, you have depression year-round, except like me, you may find it's worse during the winter months. The way I often describe this to people is like Lilo from Lilo and Stitch, when she's on the floor listening to Elvis and she's like, oh, I'm so depressed, leave me alone to die. Except I usually choose to listen to Gaga instead of some Elvis. So a lot of people ask me, Ramona, well, how can I get over my depression? I think it's the things I mentioned earlier. Certain foods, exercise, sexual activity, hanging out with other people and spending time together. That connectivity is really important. And that's why, at least at the time of this filming, that it's difficult for us right now with our depression because of COVID and the inability to do a lot of the things that I just talked about. Going to the gym, connecting with others, sexual activity, and so much more. Feelings of loneliness is a big factor in depression. This is why this time of year around the holidays, we often find that we have cuffing season. People are looking for partners for cuddling, physical touch, emotional intimacy, because there's this heightened feeling of loneliness. This is also true right now at the time of filming because of COVID, right? We're all isolated, we're feeling more lonely, it's the holidays, so we think about bringing someone home and seeing our families if we're going home this year. And so this is a time in which we're all feeling this increased feelings of loneliness. So this is why I think it's essential to stay connected with people. Now, whether that's on Zoom or social distance gatherings or whatever feels comfortable to you, and that's just in COVID. Outside of COVID, I think it's really important to stay connected, whether that is hanging out with people, sexual connection. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's all about trying to have some sort of intimacy, some sort of connection with others can reduce some of those feelings of loneliness. We talked earlier about exercise helping our serotonin and dopamine levels. Look, I feel you. I got my quarantine body. I am not in the mood to go exercise, but it is so pivotal. The more that we stay in bed and the more that we're sedentary, the more that our depression starts to rise. We know this, right? And so I know that I don't feel comfortable going to the gym right now with COVID, so I got some at-home workout equipment. I have the financial privilege for that, and you may not. And so there's so many free things on YouTube, from yoga to Zumba, and so much other stuff that you can do at home, and I really encourage you to try to get in an exercise routine. Another thing is food. We have to be very careful about the foods that we eat. Foods have a really big impact on our serotonin and dopamine levels. And so in the same way that we should be eating healthy foods like salmon, eggs, even pineapple, which we all love some pineapple, they're also really unhealthy foods. And I get it. I want to be sitting in bed shoving my face with Chromatica Oreos as much as you, but it's going to make us feel crappy. The next day, you'll notice, even though the food going down feels really good when we're eating those wings or chips or cookies, whatever, the next day we end up feeling really crappy. We get that low, almost like a hangover feeling. And that's because when we eat sugar and processed foods, they give us that immediate rush of serotonin and dopamine, but eventually we crash, right? We feel that with sugar and caffeine, and that's some of the reasons why. Now, for some, whether in COVID at the time of this filming or outside of COVID, I find a lot of folks feel this pressure that they have to go spend time with their families for the holidays. And I often question why. Where is that coming from? Is a question that you may hear a therapist ask. We love that question. I think a lot of people feel this pressure to go home for the holidays and spend it with their families. But for a lot of folks, that's not going to be pleasurable. They're not people you're typically spending time with. They're maybe not even people that you like. And for a lot of folks, They may be people that don't agree with you politically or don't support your gender identity or your sexual orientation. Maybe they're people who have abused you in the past, whether sexually, physically, emotionally, mentally. And so that can be really uncomfortable for us to have to sit with. And so let's talk about a couple different ways in which we can try to work through some of that and try to overcome this pressure that we feel to spend time with those people. I think what's important to think about and question for yourself is, why do I feel this pressure? Is it coming from my family members? Is it coming from expectations that I've been taught from society, from my family, maybe even from myself? Where is this pressure coming from? And then we can start to work through some of that. I think we all have that one person that we don't want to spend time with around the holidays, whether that's a parent, an extended family member, a sibling. And that's why I think it's important to set those boundaries so that way you aren't set in a situation in which you feel uncomfortable. On a more actionable level, I think that it comes down to telling your family, I don't got time for you, sorry. And obviously a lot nicer than that, but the point still stands, right? Oh, I'm sorry, I have something else, or oh, I'm sorry, especially this year, I don't feel comfortable with COVID. I'll see you next year. Maybe there are certain people you feel connected with. You can connect over Zoom or FaceTime, whatever feels comfortable, maybe set a compromise. But I think the worst thing that we can do, especially during this time of COVID, and again, all the things we talked about, the feelings of loneliness, isolation, depression, is to put ourselves in a situation that's going to continue to make us feel worse. It's very important to set those boundaries if you feel that you have to. We all have those experiences as queer folks, whether it's Thanksgiving, at Christmas, at Hanukkah, at Kwanzaa, whatever, where we're sitting at the table with our family and there's someone sitting across from us who doesn't have the same political ideations and furthermore may negatively talk about our rights, our identity, may not use our right pronouns. And so it's difficult to sit in that. And so I think in addition to setting boundaries, I think changing the conversation can be a great way to overcome some of that. It's really important to be aware of the things that are going to help us feel better instead of trying to sit that or try to fight it and get into a debate about politics, because that's just going to leave us feeling more shitty. So what I personally try to do is articulate my side of things in a way that's going to help them see how my argument is going to support them at the same time. Now, I know that can be really difficult to do, and so I'm not suggesting that everyone do that. If you have the emotional wherewithal, or as sometimes we say, if you have the spoons to do that, I think that that's one idea, but not everyone's going to have that, especially around the holidays. And so what I think is one other solution, just walk away. As we talked about with even showing up at the party to begin with, I think it's important to think about, why do I feel pressure to sit here and engage in this conversation? For a lot of folks, I think we get defensive because, especially as queer folks, we feel so marginalized that we are always on the defensive, right? Whether it's safety walking down the street, or feeling some type of bias at the store, or in dating, or whatever it is. And so we're constantly being berated for our identity. And so therefore we feel that we need to be on the defensive. And so I think it's important just to remember, is this conversation going to change this person's mind? Or alternatively, is that my goal? Like, what is my goal of this conversation? And why am I here trying to engage in this right now? A thing that people have particularly been talking about this year is having to deal with family members who may not believe in COVID or may not engage in social distancing. And again, I think that it comes down to explaining that you need space and that you don't feel comfortable showing up at this event or engaging in conversation about this if you decide to go regardless. It's about really holding to your boundaries and what you feel comfortable with. There's absolutely no reason in which you should feel you need to succumb to someone else's boundaries. I do think there's a lot to be said about compromise in all types of relationships, but if someone holds by their point very strongly, we can do the same, right? And we can identify some sort of compromise that's going to be effective, such as if people are going to have a party without masks and they're not engaging in social distancing and you don't feel comfortable, the compromise is you can say, I'm not going to go. And maybe you offer, as I said earlier, to check in via FaceTime or Zoom or what have you. And if they choose not to do that, then that's on them. I think we need to stop feeling this pressure to succumb and be the one who bends over backwards. I'm sure a lot of folks who are watching this or fit into that category. And so we can reflect on times in which we've done that and how harmful it's been. for our mood, for our energy. We just feel drained, and that depression cycle continues, right? And so it's very important to be cognizant of that and to try to think of ways to overcome it. I think the hardest thing for folks around the holidays is the financial ones. It's so difficult for some folks to set that boundary when there's this pressure of gift giving, and we're so pressured by stores and everything around us about sending gifts and giving gifts and all of this stuff. And for not everyone has the financial ability, especially during COVID, because of a lot of financial hardship from the pandemic, to afford to do that this year. And so again, I think it is really just about setting boundaries with your loved ones and trying to find some sort of compromise. Maybe you feel comfortable getting together, whether it's COVID or not, and having a potluck or something like that that's maybe a little bit more affordable. Or maybe, again, it's checking in over Zoom or FaceTime and just that connection as a gift, just to come on, looking at us, that's a gift. But I would imagine that the people who are in your life that are special enough to trade gifts with are special enough that they can really hear you when you say that you don't have the ability to do it. And quite frankly, if they pressure you, I think that's something to really reflect on in those relationships. Are these relationships I want in my life? Are these boundaries I need to be harder with in these relationships to really emphasize, this is my boundary and I don't like that you're not respecting it? And then think about what are actions you can take if they still, hold their own. As I said earlier, that the more that we tell people, the more defensive they can get, and that's fine. But we really have to be careful not to succumb and break our boundaries, because that can really be maladaptive to our psyche and to our mental health. Hi everyone. So quite frankly, I forgot to film the end of this in drag, so here we are. I just wanted to thank everyone for watching. If you have any questions about what I talked about, or if you want any other advice, please comment down below, and please like, comment, subscribe. I'm going to be doing a bunch of these videos moving forward. One of the ones I'm planning on doing is talking about dating. I'll be doing one about how to find an LGBTQ competent therapist. And I have a lot of other ideas that folks have suggested already. But please do let me know what other ideas you'd like me to talk about. And I love you all. Happy holidays.